All right, we are live. Hello, everybody. I know that is not your normal time for seeing me. It is well into the evening. I wanted to make this particular conversation happen, so I wanted to make sure and pull a few strings to get it to happen. It's been a little bit of work, but if it's meant to happen, it will. Welcome to the Ranting and Rolling podcast. I am Crash or the Odd Crapple or whatever you want to call me. Just don't call me late for dinner. Uh, I am here with a close personal friend who is probably I would say easily one of the top three human beings that I've ever interacted with. Um, my good friend, Phil Kahn. And if any of you start screaming at your screen, if you're Star Trek fans, at least get it on video and send it to me so I can see it because I think it'd be funny. Phil has a pop culture podcast. I believe it's called Phil's Pop Culture Palace. Did I get that right?
Close. Phil's Pop Culture Place is the name of my website, and Phil's Pop Culture Podcast is the name of the podcast.
Oh, my apologies.
No, that's hey, you're good. That was good.
I don't know, you and I were talking off stream. I don't know if you and I have ever worked directly together, but I know that you've worked with family of mine, so we became acquainted that way. And and I wasn't let me just put this out there. I wasn't trying to intentionally butter you up by saying that you're probably one of the top three humans that I've ever interacted with, but you can tell just by your body language and the presence that you have that you kind of provide an energy to a room or to people around you that is very positive, and it's something that people can absorb. And I think especially with the subject matter that you hit on in your podcast, and especially with the unfortunate isolation type times that we're facing right now, I think that a lot of positive energy, I think people need to try and harness whatever positive energy they have. And I think that you are somebody, I don't, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it seems to come natural to you. You've always been somebody, when I've come into contact with you, you're very upbeat, you're very outgoing, and you seem to smile almost 90% of the time. I don't know if I've ever seen you without a smile, but I'm gonna give it that 10%, give just in case. Mm-hmm. But about 90% of the time, I would say that I've always seen you with a smile. So what do you attribute that to?
Well, first of all, let me thank you for the really kind words. I remember the first time I met you, and it was, oh God, we were trying to figure out exactly the year, but it's got to be almost 15 years ago. I worked with your mother.
Yep.
And you and I immediately bonded. I think we have very similar personalities, and we really hit it off, and we can yak for hours, and I'm sure we're going to prove that in this conversation right here. But I want to thank you for the kind words. I feel likewise. We're very simpatico. We're very connected. And so thank you for those nice words.
And honestly, I want to, I don't know if he's going to be watching, but I want to thank Kevin Ankeny, who I interviewed recently. And, he gave me the idea to reach out to you because he had told me about your podcast, and I realized that we would have quite a bit to talk about. I know it's been a number of years since we've seen each other, but I think, going back to, what I was talking about in the times that we're facing right now, where I think that human interaction is necessary to combat the physical distance between people. I think that realizing that we still have things we can talk about, we need to find that perfect way to still interact, because I think it's a matter of health to be able to have a personal connection with somebody in any way, possible.
Agreed. And I think we're all oversaturated with all this COVID-19 stuff. It's understandable why. It's it's a critical situation.
Right.
But I like using the podcast as kind of an outlet to focus on something completely different. And I hope the audience feels the same way, not only my audience, but yours as well, to take a
Right.
break from all the COVID-19 stuff and just have fun conversations and interview interesting guests or me.
Well, I mean, I think that we all have to acknowledge that I think each human and a lot of the content, I don't know if you've gotten a chance to explore my channel, but a lot of my content, the whole reason I started my channel was because I've always been somebody who has been involved in a lot of public type of stuff, like with fundraising, this or that. And I think as I grew older, I realized that my interest was in understanding people, because I don't know if we necessarily make an effort to understand each other. And I think that above all concerns me. And I think especially right now, we need to make a concerted effort to understand each other, because on the other side of this pandemic, we're going to be back face to face with, one another. Um, and I think a better understanding of each other is going to bridge whatever divide we may have had previously, because we can't behave exactly the same as we did prior to this, because it won't allow us to move forward from where we are right now. We're just it's going to be a vicious cycle, and vicious cycles are not fun. They are detrimental to your mental and emotional health, I think.
I think you hit the nail right on the head. The interesting piece of what you just said, we're all kind of on a level playing field here. I interview celebrities on my podcast, and a lot of people kind of hold them in higher regard, like, oh, they're better than us. But you watch, and they're having conversations like this. They're stuck in their home, they're isolated, they're away from people. They're just people like you and I. And I think that's going to be the great equalizer here, is that they say we're all in this together. I think it's really true. Now, this is impacting different people in different ways. Luckily, I have a job and can pay my bills. There are other people that are now unemployed, or homeless people, or it's not affecting us the same way. So when people say,
Right.
oh, we're all in the same boat, not exactly, but we are all in this together. And I think this is going to bond us more. I think you hit the nail on the head on that one.
I think, us common folk, I'm going to leave the celebrities in a different class right now, just for the sake of this explanation. I think us common folk are realizing that I don't know if YouTube will take me down for using this particular word, and I don't mean to sound vulgar by saying this. I think we fetishize celebrities to a certain degree, and I think we put them on this pedestal, and it's kind of like what they say goes, and I think that bleeds into what pop culture unfortunately has become, because pop culture, at least the term, has been around, decades, even before I think you were born. I think it's been around since the 40s.
Yes, I was born later than the 40s. Thank you for acknowledging that.
I was trying to skirt around how to because I don't
That's
like
ageism, man.
I know, right? But pop culture has been around. I mean, the term has been around for years, but I think that it what it has stood for has obviously manifested differently based on generation. And I think, unfortunately, right now, because of social media, I think pop culture is becoming something that people really don't want to embrace anymore. Because I think, at least when I was growing up, um, and prior to that, I think pop culture was what consumers like you and I thought was popular. Whereas I was speaking to friends earlier today, getting their take on what they thought about pop culture,
Yep.
and um, one of my friends specifically said, I could have gone the rest of my life not knowing who Kim Kardashian was. And I really understood that on so many levels, because Kim Kardashian became famous for basically nothing.
Right.
She made a very explicit tape that got out, and okay, she's famous for that. And now she's some type of influencer. That doesn't make sense to me. I don't, I think that consumers need to dictate what is popular, as opposed to celebrities forcing things upon us. And I think that our kind of take on pop culture right now is we listen to celebrities as to what they think is popular, because they're being paid to say it's popular. But we don't that doesn't compute in our heads. We don't realize, or we don't take time to realize they're getting paid to say that. So they're basically indoctrinating us. And I think that it has bastardized what pop culture really should be.
That's a really interesting take. I'm going to take a little bit different angle. I agree
Okay.
with a lot of what you said, but you kept on using the word celebrities. These folks aren't celebrities. That's the interesting piece. You
But
Kim
they don't know
Kardashian
that.
isn't a celebrity. They've made her into one, but all of these reality shows are just supposed to be regular, ordinary people, and it's a glimpse into their regular, ordinary lives, but then they become sensationalized. And as you mentioned, I was reading an article today about how fake these shows really are. They're all scripted. They're all, they have preconceived ideas of where they want the show to go. So it's all baloney. But all these people that apparently we're all coming under their influence because they're influencers are just Joe Schmoes like you and me,
Mm-hmm.
that just happen to have been given a TV show or a platform to use. So if we, you and me, follow these people, which we don't, a lot of them,
We try
as
not
those
to.
influence. What's that?
We try not to.
Right. But yeah, it's like an auto accident. You drive by it and you can't help but look and stare because of
Yep.
curiosity. It's that kind of syndrome here. Um, but I think that's the difference. We talked about our generational differences here. When I grew up, there weren't any Kim Kardashians per se. Pop culture to me was whatever big movies there were at the time, and TV, and those type of celebrities. Um, Today, it's a whole different meaning. The word celebrity.
Um, like I said, I think back when you were my age, I think that pop culture was something. What's the word? Kind of natural, and it was, like I said, it was consumer driven, instead of basically having a celebrity tell us what we should be, you know, embracing. We embraced it because we connected with it, as opposed to being told, you know, that we need to embrace this. It's kind of like those stupid ass commercials, that where a celebrity who has oodles of money will try to tell you, hey, you that lives paycheck to paycheck, why don't you donate to this cause? It's like, you're getting paid to make that commercial. Why don't you donate whatever you're getting paid to that organization?
Yeah, why are you coming to me? I don't have two nickels to rub together. Take your wads of money sitting around your house and you donate.
Especially now, like these, they're
Yeah.
they're still getting paid to push these ideas and concepts. It's like, I don't like how we give celebrities so much power over us. It's like,
But isn't that on us?
It
It
is.
sounds like
It is.
you're almost like blaming the celebrities or blaming the system that created these celebrities for forcing you to watch them and listen to them and take. Isn't it
And
on you to say, "Oh, this is a bunch of crap. I'm not gonna listen to any of them"?
you're absolutely right. But I think that um, there are celebrities who I think when they finally realize the impact they have, they take advantage of it. And I think that's what I mean.
Okay,
Um, as far as um, there, I don't know if you know of an app called TikTok.
sure.
Okay,
Make
there
your own videos.
is there's a song, an audio clip on there from a song, and I believe the lyrics are either dance for me, dance for me, dance for me, or dance monkey, dance monkey, dance monkey.
Okay.
And I was watching a video the other day of this guy who regularly kind of puts celebrities on blast to try and bring them down a peg or two. And he was saying, you guys are in the entertainment world, you're there to entertain us. So dance, monkey, we don't care what your views are. You're here to entertain us. You're the jester. We're the ones that you're entertaining. If we don't give you our money, you have nothing.
Yeah.
And I think that that's where um, celebrities have lost, how they say, lost the plot. Um, they forget that we're the ones that essentially provide them with a living because we can easily move on to somebody else or something else. So I just think that pop culture was something more natural before, I would say, 2000. Um, I think it just started spiraling out of control in 2000, and it's just gotten out of hand 20 years later.
I'm not going to disagree with you. The landscape certainly is different. And it's interesting that you say like celebrities have taken advantage of their situations, and I think to a large extent that is true. Now there are some celebrities that will go out of their way to say, "Hey, listen, without you fans, there would be no me." Athletes do it as well. But sometimes that rings hollow to me. It's almost like, well, they're just saying that because it sounds good and they don't really mean it. They think
Yeah.
they're the best that thinks in sliced bread, and they're just going to say, "Oh no, it's you fans." No, I'm great. No, it's the fans. I wouldn't be. Yeah, I would. I'm great. So I think you're right on with that.
um, when it comes to things, because obviously pop culture, um, once you get to be a certain age, pop culture turns into what is known as nostalgia. And in today's age, and I actually have a few examples, in today's age, I feel like uh, companies who are in control use that against the viewing public. Um, Obviously, you remember from the late 80s, early 90s, Full House.
Sure.
Okay. Um, when Full House ended, the last two episodes were Michelle, the little girl played by the Olsen twins. Um, she had gotten into a horse riding accident and she lost her memory, and that's how Full House ended. Was they were still trying to get her memory back, and so I think my generation was always like, okay, we want to know what happened after that. And instead of a continuation, about what was it, 5 years ago now,
The
they
reboot.
brought Fuller House to Netflix.
Right.
And I don't know if you got a chance to watch that.
A little
It
bit. I
it,
watched the first episode.
well, in the first episode is actually what I'm going to base this on. It was such a shit show that it was disgusting because the entire first episode of the first season was just a bunch of callbacks to the original show. It wasn't even really an introductory episode to the new series
Right.
because it was supposed to be a series that could stand alone on its own. And I think it tried to feed too much off of the nostalgia of Full House, and I think that it eventually realized that the blood had been sucked dry, and it couldn't vampirize anything else.
Interesting. But I have a counter argument. And by the way, I know the Olsen twins didn't want to do the reboot, so you never found out what happened to Michelle. I'm sorry. Let's just
Yeah,
pretend she's brain dead and just that's why she didn't return to the show. That she wandered off somewhere and they never found her and they don't want to talk about it. But I definitely, when I hear the word pop culture, what it means to me personally is nostalgia. When I think of popular culture, I'm not thinking what's popular today. To me, pop culture is the stuff that was popular back when I was in my formative years. So a lot of my podcasts revolve around, somebody I watched on TV 30 years ago that I get to chat with, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
There are all these reboots now, including Fuller House. If you're saying, you know what, it was relying too heavily on nostalgia, it should have been a show that could stand on its own too. Well, if that's what you were looking for, then it shouldn't be a reboot. It should be a brand new show, not at all associated with the old show. Of course, anything that's a reboot is going to count on some spillover with nostalgia. And
Right.
that's why I think there are too many reboots that don't have to be. I mean, I'm trying to think. Starsky and Hutch. There was a reboot movie of Starsky and Hutch with Ben Stiller and I think Owen Wilson or something. Yeah. And I understand it, but really, well, that's a bad example. I was going to say it wasn't really similar to the original. It was more campy than the original. But there are shows that are reboots that didn't have to be. Let's take a cop show. It didn't have to be a cop show about some cops from 30 years ago. It could have just been a cop show with different names and different, locations, and that could have stood on its own. So a lot of times things are rebooted that didn't have to be rooted in the old stuff or isn't really associated with the old stuff, and there we are.
Do you think that people rely too much on nostalgia because they lack the ability to be, original?
Yes. I have a friend that says there are no original ideas. Every idea has been thought of. Everybody's like, we find out new things all the time. No, we don't. There's nothing new. Everything is recycled. And I think we count too much on that. Yeah, and I fall into that. If I found out, tomorrow there's going to be a Brady Bunch reunion, I'm all over it because, and there was a HGTV, actually, they renovated the Brady house. That was cool.
I watched every episode of that and I loved every minute of it.
Oh, absolutely. So, what was your question?
I think you might be familiar with, because I think it's from your generation, the original One Day at a Time. Do you remember that show?
Of course.
They had a reboot of it on Netflix.
An all Latino cast.
Yes, and I was actually very glad that they did it that way, because it wasn't trying to. Somebody described it as when you try and continuously get something out of something that's already gone. If you keep kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel, you're just getting wood chips. They really infused some new ideas into the new series. So I think that it really helped. And the fans, I don't know if you saw the uproar that the fans had when Netflix dropped the show. So there's a channel called the Pop Channel that picked it back up for a fourth season. But the Pop Channel just had to stop production because of the virus. They got, I think, 6 episodes. Justina Machado um, said that they got 6 episodes into the 4th season and they had to stop production because of the virus, because they have so many, not so many, but they have enough elderly people on staff that they don't want them to be susceptible to getting the virus. Obviously, Rita Moreno is on the show. They don't want her to get sick.
Sure, of course.
Because she's kind of like Betty White. Everybody, if you want to talk about pop culture, you talk about Betty White,
right?
And everybody says protect Betty White because
right.
we don't want Betty White to ever die. It really, no, she might not. You're right, but it really, I think it really kind of warmed my heart to hear Justina say that, because you get the younger generation of actors, and you never know if they're going to actually grasp the severity of something. But when you have somebody as humble as Justina saying we need to protect our cast members so that we can provide a product that's worth providing, then it's like, wow, somebody still gets it. But she's somebody, well, at least in my eyes, she's somebody from a different generation. So she understands the importance of all that kind of stuff. Whereas I think consumerism has gotten just way out of hand, where people just expect too much from certain people in the industry or people that are entertainers and such.
You know what I find to be the most refreshing thing that's come out of this? I really like the fact that musicians and actors and actresses have kind of donated their time and put on free shows for people. I think that's very nice. But I think the coolest thing I've seen, and I'm sure you've seen it, is John Krasinski, formerly of The Office, does the Good News SGN network.
Some good news. I literally just subscribed to that channel like 2 weeks ago, and I actually haven't watched an episode yet. I need to, but
you got it. They're fabulous.
Krasinski is amazing. I actually was unfamiliar with who he was until I saw him on Lip Sync Battle. Did you ever see? Did you see the episode?
I didn't see that episode, but I've seen.
Okay. Look up John Krasinski on Lip Sync Battle, and he ends up doing Proud Mary by Tina Turner.
Nice.
And he ends up in a sequin, I don't know what you would call it, but it was something that only Tina Turner should wear. And he was dancing around stage, lip syncing to Proud Mary, and I almost fell out of my chair. That's because great. It was so hysterical. But that's how I became familiar with who he was. And then I just saw a movie that he and his wife did. I believe it was called A Quiet Place.
Yes.
And the entire movie, now...
they had to be quiet. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Both of us being from back up north, I know you're probably familiar with Prospect School.
Sure.
Okay. I went to Prospect when I was little, and I actually had a lot of friends who were deaf. And then when I was in middle school, I actually had a girlfriend at one time who was deaf. So I've always known how to, use sign language. So even though I'm not a deaf person, that movie actually got me very emotional, because it showed the diversity in their ability and the diversity in their willingness to, reach out to a different, group of people to draw new fans into what they do and what they produce. And I want to see the second one. Like the second one actually, I believe, came out this year, or was supposed to. Maybe it didn't because of the virus. I don't know, but it was slated to come out this year. But yeah, I loved that movie, and I didn't understand it at first. I had to look up the synopsis of it to understand it. But yeah, when you have somebody who is as down to earth and as versatile as John Krasinski, it's refreshing. It's really refreshing.
Oh, you're gonna love his new show. It's great, and not because it's clever and he does cool things. It's because we hear enough negative things with all the politics going on, even before COVID-19. Negative, negative,
Hmm.
negative. People at each other's throats all the time. Anger like I've never seen before in my lifetime. We
Yeah.
need good news. We need levity.
Hmm.
And that's kind of getting back to what we talked about earlier. And that's one of the reasons I do my podcast for fun, to bring smiles to people's faces, to bring laughs.
Yeah.
Needed more than ever now.
Yeah. Just as an aside, just so we're not ignoring all of the aspects of the live stream, I believe you can see the chat.
See, now I'm going to have to show my age more. I was trying to look younger, but now I'm going to have to.
Well, I don't know. I believe you can see the live chat on your end.
Yeah, it says, oh, private chat and live comments. Oh, look at
Okay,
that. Oh,
the live comments. There should be a ton of them that you can see.
yes.
By
Next Juice
all,
says hello. Hi, Next
yep.
Juice.
By all means, if you want to address
Vandals Folk Art.
anybody,
Hey there. Hey there.
you can
Content
address them.
Monstra brand. Interesting.
Yeah.
Wonder what
James
they.
Bennett is actually a very good friend of mine. I actually met him at Dragon Con in Georgia.
Oh, cool. Hey,
Yeah, so
James, how are you? Thanks
he's
for
a
watching.
he's a really good friend of mine, and I know he's going to yell at me in the chat when I say this, but the reason that I actually approached him,
Yeah.
and I know he's probably giving me the finger right now because he knows what's about to come out of my mouth.
Uh-oh.
Um, the reason that I actually approached him at Dragon Con was because he looks exactly like another YouTuber that I follow who calls himself Markiplier,
Okay.
and James looks exactly like him. And I got so confused. I thought Markiplier was actually at this convention. And then I realized obviously it wasn't him, but James and I actually got to, have a really great conversation. And we've been in touch ever since. And I think it'll be 2 years in August since I met him.
Cool.
Yeah, he's a
Cool.
really cool dude.
Well, I'm
He's
glad you're listening in, James. Wait, I got to read his questions here or his comments.
okay.
Jeebus, I don't remember the last episode. I thought it just vanished. Jeebus, that's a Simpsons reference, isn't it? It was all a coma dream. Yeah. People 20 years from now will be watching the animated reboot of Disney live action remakes.
Yeah.
See, no new ideas. They just keep rebooting it, but in slightly different ways. He's right.
Yeah.
He's right, James.
What was your opinion when they started announcing all of the live remakes of all of the animated classics for Disney? Do you think do you think it's a
Well,
cash
believe me,
grab?
it's easy to. Yes, I was just going to use the term money grab. First of all, everything's a money grab. Nobody goes into this business saying, "Oh, I don't care if I make any money doing it." They want to put out good products and their art, but you want to make money, and not just like, oh, I want to make money to become rich, but you got to make enough money to fund whatever you're putting out there. You got to at least
Right.
break even or more. So everything's a cash grab. Like, look at this, I've got product placement right here as a. So I'm an example of a cash grab too. Maybe Pepsi's paying me to be on this episode. Anyway,
Honestly, even though I don't drink soda, I would love to be sponsored by, Pepsi. I wouldn't mind. I don't know if you drink
no, you
energy
got to
drink.
drink it you can't have somebody sponsor you and you don't even use
Oh, I
their
know.
product.
I don't know if you drink energy drinks at all.
I don't.
There's an energy drink that I recently became familiar with called Bang, Bang.
Okay.
And I typically I don't get involved with energy drinks because I'm extremely caffeine sensitive. But this one has no carbonation. It has very little caffeine, no calories, no sugar, no salt. And it is probably the best thing I've ever tasted in my life. And if I ever was able to have the opportunity to be sponsored by them, I would be made in the shade. Like I would love it. I would love that.
Well, here's what you're going to do. As soon as this is done, you're going to take this clip of what you just said and you're going to send it into them. And it would help if through the remainder of your episodes, whether they sponsor you or not, you should have product placement. You should have it in your hand and always drink it. And I would even make a joke out of it and say, like, these guys don't sponsor me, but I don't care. I'm going to promote them anyway because they're great.
Yeah.
Drink. And just have it be like the theme of it. And then every 5 minutes, bring up something related to that. Like, I feel like you have a lot of energy. Do you drink Bang by any chance? Or, hey, remember when we were talking about the history of a... I remember when Bang was first introduced.
And honestly,
then you'll be a sellout.
Being that we're talking about pop culture, we can talk about comics where they actually have to have the very large word bang when they're trying to, describe a noise. Yeah. Instead of having that on the screen, we can have the can of Bang.
There you go.
While we're talking about comics.
There you go. We'll get a sponsor for you, Ryan. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Well, we'll get that done. Don't worry.
One of the things I kind of want to get back on track. I mean, I don't mind if we go off track. It's fun. But one of the things that I'm curious, and I know that you were talking about ageism before we went live.
No, it's okay.
But
it's okay.
Do you think that what someone considers popular or noteworthy has anything to do with their upbringing? Like, does that have any influence in regard to what you consider what pop culture is to you? Because I think pop culture is something different to everybody.
Absolutely. I mentioned this to you briefly before we came on air. And this deals with the nostalgia piece as well. When I interview people, when I pick people to interview for my podcast, I often go back to people I grew up watching. So what did they mean to me? Well, to be perfectly frank, I grew up in a very dysfunctional family situation. And TV was respite for me. It was a way to escape. And escape I did. I watched tons of it. Which was always supposed to be a bad thing. You'd become addicted to TV and that. It's kind of like how people today think of kids with their video games or always have their face buried in cell phones. But anyway, those characters kind of became extended family for me. And if you go to my webpage, and I'm not trying to shamelessly plug myself, but
go ahead.
BillsPopcast.com is my website. The little introductory paragraph said, "Hi, my name is Phil. My parents were Mike and Carol, and I had 6 brothers and sisters, Marcia, Jan, Cindy, Greg, and Bobby, and we had a maid." And I jokingly say that I had a lot of interesting babysitters growing up, like Fonzie and Archie and Edith and Lucy and Ethel. That was my little homage to all the characters I loved growing up. But in a way, I was trying to be silly, but it was truthful as well. These people were my extended family, and in some ways, my substitute family. So my upbringing has a direct connection to my love of pop culture. Definitely.
Do you think that your upbringing kind of helped you define what pop culture is to you?
To me, yes.
Yes.
To me, yes. Now, here's another interesting thing. Everything is all interconnected here. You mentioned how we, is the word lionize celebrities, like, oh, we treat them like gods, like they're, above us. And what's interesting is that you mentioned you go to Comic-Cons, for example. Yep. I go to a lot of celebrity conventions a lot. And the interesting thing is, I'm a closet fanboy. If I saw William Shatner, it's like, oh my God, it's William Shatner. Oh my God, Captain Kirk. But it's very important for me to not look like that guy.
Yeah.
So I do everything I can to make it seem like, oh, I'm just there. Oh, it's William Shatner. Yeah, let me go over and... Because there are a lot of geeks that go to these things that can't control themselves and make it look bad for the rest of us. I remember I was at a convention, Chiller Theater Expo in Parsippany, New Jersey. They hold it twice a year. It's great. It's for horror movie fans. And Larry Wilcox, who used to be on the show Chips.
Yeah, I met him.
Ponch and John. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I actually met both of them. I met both of them in Nashville.
Oh, yeah, they're great. They're great. That's awesome. But I'm standing in line waiting to get an autograph. And I'm being nonchalant. In my mind, I'm thinking, "Oh my God, it's John from Chips.
Yeah.
Oh, I loved him." Um, and the guy in front of me was gushing over him and telling him how much of a difference Chips made in his life. And there was an episode of Chips where there was a little boy being bullied on the bus, and he was bullied on the bus. And I shouldn't make light of that. It was meaningful to him.
Yeah.
But the guy was going on as if he was meeting the Pope or the president, and I'm thinking, buddy, it's Larry Wilcox. Chill out a little bit. You're just going too overboard. And so I had to counterbalance him. So I was very nonchalant, like, "John, good to be here." I said, "Oh, do you ever get tired of talking to folks that constantly gush?" I'm trying to
Yeah.
commiserate with them. Like, unlike me, I'm very cool and collected
Yeah.
and treating it like you're no big deal. But those guys got to bother you. Those geeky guys that fall all over you, right? So that's kind of my long answer to your question.
Right. And I think there is some justification for the way that you approach celebrities and the way that that guy approaches celebrities, because my first convention, like I told you, was in 2014. It was Wizard World Nashville.
Oh, cool.
And the first celebrity I ever met was Jason Frank from the Power Rangers, the Green Ranger.
Okay.
And the reason that I went to that convention was because I knew he was going to be there. And at the time, remember I was talking to you off stream, I had told you I was living in Tennessee for a little while.
Yep.
I had found out that the convention was going to be in Nashville. So I was thinking, you know what? It's only 6 hours away. I'll just take a bus out to Nashville and stay out there for the weekend and come back.
Yeah.
So it was convenient for me. But I was, instantly when I got there, I met so many cool people that were just regular everyday people. I had passes to meet Jason Frank, but it was like the day after the convention started. So it wasn't the first day, but he was there all weekend. I was talking to these people on the first day, and we were just kind of going around the convention floor, and we had stopped and talked. I wasn't paying attention to my surroundings. I didn't know what we were in front of or what was around us. I was so engrossed in the conversation.
Yep.
I really didn't care because I was so intrigued by what we were talking about. Turns out we were 75 feet away from Jason Frank's table. And these idiots that I was talking to knew that I was there to see him. They decided to derail me completely, and they pointed to his table. I froze. I looked like a deer in headlights. And I'm staring 75 feet away. I'm staring at his table. Phil, I shit you not. I'm not sure how this happened. He saw me from 75 feet away. He had a line of about 400 people at his table. He stopped his line, came over to me, shook my hand, and said, "I'll see you tomorrow." And it blew my mind. And the people that I was with said that it took me a good 45 seconds to a minute to be able to talk again. So it wasn't me approaching a celebrity and being speechless. It was not even realizing that I had just shook his hand. It didn't process in my brain that he had just come over to me.
That's so funny.
And that has made me continue to go to conventions because it was such a surreal experience and it was such a positive experience.
That's great. I'm so glad it did. Again, before we came on, you and I were talking about this and your first experience. And I know it's made a difference in your life because you've connected with something that really gives you energy and you really feel connected to it, as do I, going to these conventions and stuff. So I'm glad that happened. I'm glad you had a good experience, because if you had had a bad experience, you may never have gone back, but you did.
Right.
Great. Oh, hold on a second. I know you're the host, but
oh no, I
know.
The
funniest unfunny guy just wrote a couple of messages. "Hey, my friends, just stopped by to say yo. Smile and laugh often, my friends. Be safe out there. You guys have a phenomenal night. Smile and laugh often, my friends." I hope he's still on. Thanks, funniest unfunny guy.
Hey, unfunny. I'm sorry. We were just so engrossed in the conversation. I was going to get to you. Um, it's hard for
This
me because I
guy's a
don't.
horrible host, isn't he? He's not even
Yeah,
keeping
I
track of
know.
who's here.
I'm
He's come on,
I'm
you got to be able to
terrible.
multitask. You got to be able to have a conversation with me, ask me interesting questions, and
Right.
also interact with your fans at the same time. Come on, man.
Well, and I mean that's why I pointed out, or that's why I stopped and pointed out the chat before. Um, but
I'm
yeah,
just busting on you, you know.
no, I know. um, one of the things, and you're probably going to think this is a funny reference to lead into this. Do you think, especially today, with all of the things that people try to force into pop culture, do you think that there are things that people have tried to force into pop culture representation? And the one thing that comes to mind, do you remember the movie Mean Girls with Lindsay
Sure.
Lohan? Do
Yeah,
you
she
remember?
looked great in that movie, by the way. But that's beside the point.
Do you remember? I believe they were called the group of girls that she ended up getting involved with, the Plastics. I think that's what they were called. Regina George was one of the characters, and then Gretchen Wiener was one of the other characters.
Yeah.
And I believe Gretchen Wiener was actually played by Lacey Chabert,
Oh, I love it.
if
You're
I'm not
right.
mistaken.
You are
But
correct.
Gretchen Wiener, throughout the whole damn movie, for some odd reason, was trying to, or kept saying, "That's so fetch." And eventually, the character of Regina George looks at her and says, "Gretchen, stop making fetch try to happen. It's not going to happen." So my question to you is: are there any examples that you can think of things that people have tried to um, shoehorn in and try and force them into pop culture?
Off the top of my head, and maybe
Hold on.
something will come to me as I speak, but off the top of my head, I can't think of a specific example. But my answer to you is yes, we all do it and we do it all the time, especially in this culture. You mentioned TikTok earlier. There's Facebook feeds. We're all trying to post clever, interesting things with the hope that it'll go viral. I think that's forcing it. It's like, what can I say that's really amusing that not only will two or three of my friends like, but who knows, maybe they'll share and it'll become a catchphrase or a meme or something that's going to be really, really popular. I think the whole world is trying to capture something in a bottle, and that's shoehorning it. That's
Yeah.
my thought.
Okay. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, you can
Okay.
hear me.
No, I can hear you, but for some reason my wireless headset decided to talk to me and say that it was out of range, even though I hadn't moved. I wanted to make sure that you could still hear me.
I
I
can.
heard it. I heard everything you said. Little audio snafu, but whatever. But yeah, it's just I don't understand, especially nowadays, with people trying to force things to happen that are unnatural or are going to damage the original product. Like the things that they're trying to do to comics, movies, literature, reviving old shows to modernize them when those shows really spoke to the time that they were in, like the time that they originated in. And like you were saying, if you're going to revive something, revive it so it connects with, a completely new generation instead of trying to shoehorn in nostalgia just to draw in, because that's a cheap way of doing it.
I
And
agree.
it
I
just,
agree.
and like I said, I think it bastardizes it.
Absolutely. And that's why, if you really think about it, and you may disagree with me on this, I think 90% of reboots are horrible. They fail. They're trying to walk that fine line, and we've talked about this, between nostalgia, and I don't think that works because things aren't quite the same. Let's say they reboot a TV show 20 years later. It's like, well, the characters are older, they don't, circumstances have changed. That show was really better suited for the 70s. It doesn't quite work now. Or they're trying to balance it with, let's modernize it. It's like, well, if it's too modernized and it doesn't look at all like the original, then there goes the nostalgia piece. So why did you reboot it to begin with?
Mm-hmm.
Um, this came to mind. I love like Family Guy, for example, because it makes fun of a lot of this stuff. There was also a movie, I'm sure you've seen, the Brady Bunch movie, which was a spoof of the Brady Bunch TV show. They had a couple
I
of.
think I've seen it. Yeah.
Have you seen it? It was a spoof of the original where they make fun of the original by the characters are all still in their 1970s persona. They still dress the same. They still use words like groovy, but it's set in the 90s, in like the grungy 90s. And it's brilliant because it's the kind of reboot that should be, because it's acknowledging the fact that it's the 90s. The 70s storyline does not fit at all. But instead of trying to make it fit, they made fun of it. It's great. If you don't recall seeing it, or you saw it and don't, you got to watch it. If you're a big Brady Bunch fan, like you said, you'll love it. You'll love it.
Were there two things that the two last things that I have on my kind of sheet that I wanted to talk about, unless you have more, are there any things that you can remember growing up that were popular to your parents that might have kind of just ended up being popular to you just by association with your parents? And as a second part of that, because I know that there are I think with every young generation, when you are between certain ages, the things that you find popular, your parents are always going to be against. Do you remember anything from when you were growing up that was popular that your parents were dead set about, or with you being a part of?
Oh, that interesting question. Let me think on that a bit. I think you're asking about my personal situation, but I
Yes.
think in general, we are certainly influenced by what our parents like. Ask any kid what their favorite football team is. Chances are 90% chance that the father or mother rooted for the same team. So it just kind of trickled down. Then this may not be exactly answering your question, but I'm going to do it anyway. I often, let's say I'm reminiscing about a movie from the 40s. That was before I was born. It's like, well, how would you know about that movie? You weren't even born yet. It's like, well, just because I wasn't born doesn't mean I can't be aware of it.
Right.
And so I know I'm aware of a lot of pop culture things before I was born. Things that my parents watch, Jack Benny or Bing Crosby, or, we're going way back here. And today, however, if I meet, let's say, a 20-year-old and they talk about a rock song that they like from the 70s, and I'm thinking, how do you know that song? It was before you were born. So I'm contradicting everything I just said. It's like, Phil, number one,
my mom
just because
still
it was,
my mom
it
still
was, well, I'm sorry.
My mom still doesn't understand how I know more about the music that she grew up with than she does.
Isn't that funny? Because it's still out there, and a lot of parents teach their kids. Like, I have a buddy that's big into 70s rock, and he's constantly introducing his daughter to it, and she loves it. Now, I don't know if she's pretending to love it because he wants her to love it and living vicariously through her, or whether she does. But I find it refreshing when somebody says, "Oh, I love that Led Zeppelin album." It's like, you've heard of Led Zeppelin? Oh my God, you're only 20. I just find it really funny. So that may not be answering your question quite the way you hope.
But I mean, are there, I guess if you can remember anything specific, was there anything specific that was popular or interesting to your parents that inadvertently became interesting to you? And then was there anything that was interesting to you that your parents were dead set against purely because they didn't understand it?
Well, the first thing that pops into my head was the classic TV show All in the Family.
Yep.
Now, that show would never air today.
No.
Because Archie Bunker was a bigot, very prejudiced. And even though it was a spoof on folks of his ilk, it was still very controversial when it came out. And I remember, I was very young. I didn't understand politics or, conservative viewpoints or liberal viewpoints. And I remember my mother loved the show. And I think part of it was because she was kind of an Archie Bunker type, and I don't think she quite understood the spoofiness, if that's a word, of it.
Yeah.
She just loved everything Archie was spouting, when in actuality they were making him out to be a buffoon spouting
Yeah.
these things. Anyway, but I started following the show because of her and really got into it, but from seeing it from a much different lens.
Hmm.
But so that was an interesting kind of evolution there as far as that show. As far as me liking something that they didn't approve of, um, I guess it would be easy to say, well, the rock and roll of the 70s they thought was, a little too much, and, people on stage wearing makeup and half clothed and, all that kind of stuff. They
Hmm.
didn't they didn't get it. But that's a typical answer.
Yeah.
Back in my day, we had,
Yeah.
Benny Goodman and, and Al Jolson. And nowadays you've got the David Bowies and Elton Johns with, dressing in all these outlandish outfits and blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. So there's your.
And I think just to touch briefly on it, I think a lot of that starts out as subculture or counterculture, but eventually just becomes, I think, things that are subculture or counterculture. I think the more you grow to understand them, the more they enter into the realm of pop culture.
I
Because
agree.
the more understanding you have of something, the more you're going to embrace it. And I think the more you embrace something, the more popular it becomes. I tend to hate that word popular just because of, the kind
But
of
pop is short for popular. You got to embrace
right, right.
it.
But I think that there's such a stigma around popular things, just because it seems like a passing fad, as my mom's generation would have called it. It's just, yeah. I think, it things go through stages, and I think
Yeah.
that that's what we have to understand is things that are going to be subculture or counterculture. They're counter to what people see as popular, but eventually those things become more understood and then become pop culture. And I have to wonder, I know a lot of my friends were very resistant to pop culture because the more that the more things that they embraced that ended up becoming pop culture, they resented it because it's like, okay, now you guys don't understand the origin of where this came from, but you're embracing it because it's now becoming the thing.
Yeah.
And so, I mean,
That's interesting.
yeah, it's definitely interesting to see the evolution of something, from from subculture to counterculture to pop culture. Um,
But what
yeah,
happens is, I mentioned Elton John and David Bowie and that ilk. To the previous generation, that was counterculture. They're dressing weird. They're, or even going back to the '60s with all the crazy hippies and on drugs all the time, et cetera, et cetera. Um, so that was counterculture. But the fact that it stayed so long, it became normal. It just kind of became like, oh, there's David Bowie. Nobody would even give a second thought to it. Or all of a sudden, oh, now there's Kiss wearing
yeah,
makeup, and then all these hair metal bands in the '80s, and all of a sudden you become desensitized to it, and it's not weird anymore. It's just normal stuff. So then when people embrace it, they're really not embracing counterculture stuff. They're embracing normal popular things.
yeah.
So it all depends. Yeah, a theme here, not only with you and this show, has kind of been like the radicals that are anti-establishment. There's an anti-establishment piece to this, and it's like, oh, my
Hmm.
friends resented that, blah blah blah, but now they accept it. I think that's part of the reason, is because they didn't accept it, maybe at first because it was too commercialized or too whatever. But then when it comes kind of mainstream, it's less objectionable and more easily embraceable for the people that are typically, anti
Yeah,
everything.
yeah. I mean, I uh, I think And I've seen this a lot on TikTok where parents will see what their kids are doing on TikTok, and then the parents will do it, and the kids will be horrified and never want to do it again. And I think that parents use TikTok as a weapon against their kids.
Yeah,
Uh,
sure.
and
Why
it's
not?
and I mean it's a way to get kids to kind of act right, so to speak, especially if they're doing something they really shouldn't be at their age, which a lot of that happens on TikTok. Um, so it's funny to see the way that parents use pop culture against their kids.
It's true.
Um,
It's true. But there's also another aspect to it, I think. I think parents want to show that they're still cool too.
yeah,
And that back in their day, back in the old days, those were cool days. It wasn't like, oh yeah, the old, oh, I walked 5 miles back and forth to school and I didn't have any shoes. And no, I want to show you that, yeah, I listened to Zeppelin and I listened to this and that, and I was very cool back then. And now this new TikTok-y thing, whatever you call it, and say, I don't understand this TikTok-y. No, parents are trying to pretend like, oh yeah, I know TikTok. I've done some videos. I'm cool. I'm down with that. And it doesn't matter. No matter how cool you'll portray yourself, if you're older, you're never going to be cool.
right. Um, One of the last things I want to touch on, unless you have more, but one of the last things I wanted to touch on, you and I were talking before we went live about the fact that I was watching Star Trek: The Next Generation pretty much all day.
Uh-huh.
And I swear it was not to make a Kahn joke. I swear, but it just happened.
Come
It just happened to be on, and I liked the show. But uh, one of the episodes that was on really kind of hit a topic, sort of in a way that I wanted to touch on tonight.
Okay.
Is where, because of the times that we're seeing right now, with all of us kind of having to be on what you referred to as an equal playing field, because we're all realizing that we're struggling through the same thing essentially. Um, I believe, oh, what was it? The episode was called Frame of Mind,
Okay.
and Commander Riker was he was on a mission for the Enterprise, and he ended up getting kidnapped. And what they did, they knocked him out and they put a sensor on his head,
Okay.
and it was giving him these hallucinations, making him think that these I forgot what the creatures were called. Um, these creatures from this ship were actually the people he was supposed to be with, and that the people from his crew from the Enterprise were his enemy.
Ah.
And um, he started to feel so isolated because he didn't understand why he recognized the people from the Enterprise, but he didn't recognize these creatures that were trying to say, hey, we're the ones that you need to be with. So, with the things that we're going through right now, um, I'm curious what your thoughts are in regard to pop culture. Where do you see pop culture on the other side of this pandemic? Do you see it still existing? What form do you see it existing in? Because I think it's going to take on a drastic new face on the other side of this pandemic, because what we what has been popular to us is currently unavailable to us. So are we still going to resume our popular activities after this, or are we going to find new activities within the confines of social distancing and all this kind of stuff? Are we going to be able to have pop culture in a community sense, or is it going to be in an individual sense?
Well, first of all, I agree with you. And not only pop culture, but everything's going to look different after this pandemic ends. The world is going to be forever changed. We don't know how it's going to be changed, but it's not going to be the same as it was. To answer your question, again, it all depends on how you define pop culture. I told you, for me, it's the nostalgia piece of this.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm answering from that point of view, I think pop culture is going to play, for me and many others of my ilk, is going to play a key role in the healing of the world after the pandemic. Because if nostalgia makes me feel good, I'm going to be looking for stuff after this ends that makes me feel really good. And if nostalgia is my big thing, I want to get back into that world. I remember, we were talking about Comic Cons and other conventions like that. I'm going through withdrawal because I love those things. I love connecting with the various celebrities. I need that more than ever. We all need human interaction, but that's one piece of interaction that I really look forward to again, is connecting with that. So whether it's, again, watching an old episode of MASH or watching something new, and I don't mean to limit pop culture to just TV and movies.
Right.
It goes way beyond that. But for me personally, and I think for a lot of people, they're going to be looking for something to cling on to, and I think pop culture can be that in a lot of ways. That's just my take on it.
Klingon, really? Did you have to make a Star Trek joke? Klingon, really? Being that, for me, a lot of what motivates me is music, and one of the and this is kind of a deep sort of philosophical question.
Go for it.
Do you think that we are going to have to get to know each other again after this? Because do you think that this experience is going to change us enough to where we're going to have to kind of reintroduce ourselves to ourselves and each other?
The answer is yes. And I'm hopeful, although not necessarily optimistic. I told you, before this pandemic broke out, this world was divided. Politics more than ever, and the recent, political situation has really divided us. And beyond that, anger and rancor like I've never seen before has taken place. I mentioned the level playing field now. One would hope that with us all in the same boat, we're all sitting at home, all by ourselves or with family members only, we can't get out there. You'd think we'd start having a little more empathy for everyone, whether they agree with our politics or not, whether they come from the same walk of life as us or not. You would hope that we would kind of see each other on that same field after this, and we would indeed do what you're suggesting, and that's get to re-know each other. Or the bigger piece of that is giving folks a chance. In other words, wanting to get to know people, opening up and having people get to know us all over again. The optimists would say, yes, I think, there's a silver lining to every cloud, and perhaps one of the silver linings here is it gave us pause to step back and really take stock of our lives, and why are we on this planet, and are we here to help each other, and why is connection so important, so on and so forth. I would like to think that we're going to come out better as human beings for this, and there will be a nice new reconnection. The realist in me says, maybe that's being a little too naive. I think there's been so much anger.
I don't know if it's naive. I think it's hopeful.
What do you think? What do you think?
I think it's hopeful. I don't think it's naive.
Okay.
One thing I'm curious of, if you can kind of put this into words, who was Phil Kahn before this pandemic, and have you noticed, or have you become somebody different in the midst of it? What has changed about you since the pandemic started?
Interesting. You really want to get into it. Well, it's funny. At the top of the show, again, thanks for your kind words. You said, "Oh, I'm very effusive and friendly and funny and blah blah blah," and it must be innate. The interesting thing is that It was self-taught. I'm by nature an introvert, very quiet. I was very nerdy. I wasn't a popular kid. I was picked on a lot growing up. A lot of this is self-taught. I think it's genuine, but I really had to force myself out of my shell to become more connected with folks. But my baseline, what I always fall back on, is I tend to be very reclusive. I tend to keep my distance from folks. I'm not the party animal. If you saw me at a party, you'd think, oh, this guy feels right at home here, being the center of attention and Mr. Party Guy. That's a learned thing. Given the choice, I would either not go to the party or I'd sit in the corner by myself, kind of watching everything else going on. All that said, this you would think, well, I was reclusive to begin with. My life really hasn't changed that much through this.
Yeah,
but
me
here's
too.
the difference. Here's the difference. Yeah, I can see that. But here's the difference. Before, I could choose when to be reclusive and when to put myself out there. Now, I don't have that choice. I'm stuck being reclusive. So even though 6 days out of 7, if I don't see a single soul, I'm cool with that. People can
Yeah,
be pains in the asses. I'm cool with not seeing a soul. On the 7th day, if I'm like, you know what, I really miss people's company. I want to go out and be with a big crowd of friends and just have that as a pick me up. I don't have that ability now to choose. So I think the way that I'm going to probably change after this is that I'm going to choose more often to put myself out there more and to interact more and to connect more and on a deeper level with people than I had been, because it's not always going to be a choice. Or while it is a choice, I want to take advantage and make the right choices before all of a sudden all my choices are gone and they're made for
right.
me, and my life is going to be based on what I'm allowed to do. So
Yeah.
there's my deep philosophical looking deep inside Phil Kahn and what goes on in his little mind. That's how it's impacted me. What do you think?
Last question, because I know that you and I are both music heads. If you have, and I'm not going to give you a strict number, any songs that you can think of, if you had to give me a certain any number of songs, what songs would you give me to help get to know you?
Ooh,
I did this
ooh,
with my cousin a couple months ago, and I asked her, I was like, give me 5 songs that help me get to know you better.
ooh.
And she actually thanked me for it because it really it gave her the ability to self-reflect.
Interesting. Now, is it songs that were meaningful to her, or was it songs
Yes,
that told a story about something in her life to give you more of a glimpse into who
both,
she was? Both?
both. It just songs that would help me get to know who you are.
Let me think. See, I'd need a week to think this out. I'd put out a piece of paper and I'd write down some. That's how I am. I'm a list guy. I would write down like some candidates. I'd come up with like 100 things, and then I'd cross this out and cross that out. To be funny, the first song would probably be "Love Stinks,"
Yep,
because
I love that.
love really stinks on so many different levels.
Yeah,
No, love is great
yeah,
actually, but
yeah,
the lack thereof
yeah.
is a sucky thing. So love stinks. What other stinky love songs that silly love songs? No. Um, let's see. How about a song that's really meaningful to me? It's interesting. People are either lyric people or music people, meaning
Mhm,
that they'll listen to a song and they'll like the melody, or they listen to a song and the words speak to them. And
mhm.
I'd like to think of myself as a guy where the words speak to them, but it doesn't. I just like a nice melody. Here's a good one. This is one of my friend's favorite songs, but when he said the line to me, it really resonated. And see if you recognize this. If you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. Does that lyric sound familiar?
I don't know if I've heard it in the context of a song, but I've heard the actual line. I
It's from a
don't.
Rush song,
Oh, see, I don't listen to Rush.
Free Will. Yeah, you got to
Okay.
listen to it. If you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. I
Yeah.
will choose free will.
Oh wait, I have heard that song. I
Yeah.
just didn't know. I guess I've never connected with
Yeah.
Rush, so I guess it didn't click in my head.
Wouldn't it be funny if I turned on my little Winamp and played it for you right now?
I wouldn't do that.
Okay, we want. Oh,
You,
there'll be feedback
you,
and.
well, no, YouTube will take the stream down.
Oh, will they take it
YouTube,
down for my bad singing? That's what they
no.
really should do for my bad.
But
But anyway, I
they,
really like that because it kind of gets back to the answer I just gave you.
mhm,
I often don't um, take action because I overthink things
yeah,
all the time. So it's like, should I do this? Shouldn't I do this? I spend 2 weeks. Should I? Shouldn't I? Should I? Shouldn't I? Should I? And people are always like, Phil, just pick one or the other. Either don't do it and leave it behind, or just do it. And it's like, no, I got to be sure that this is the right step to take, blah, 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 blah. So really the line that says, if you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice.
mhm,
I've done that a million times, and the choice has been that I'm not doing anything.
right,
I really need to learn that. That's me in a nutshell right there.
yeah.
Big
I
time.
just, I'm curious. I wonder if we can. I wonder if the trend can catch on to get people on the other side of the pandemic to come up with a list of songs that they can give to somebody to kind of reintroduce themselves to them.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah, we'll make
And
that happen. I'll tell you what. Come up with some way to package that. Not only the way you're trying to package this podcast, but also patching that, trying to make that a trendy thing. Not trendy. That sounds wrong.
no, I get what you're saying though.
If you want to make this a thing and get it out there, I think it's a marvelous idea. And perhaps that energy drink you were talking about can support that. Reach out to the energy drink people with the product placement stuff we talked about earlier to
That's not a bad idea.
not only to sponsor this podcast, but also with the idea, everybody out there is looking for something to clutch on to, not
Yeah,
only during this pandemic, but afterwards, that'll help them heal, that'll help them feel more connected again. And that idea is terrific.
yeah.
And that is a great gateway to find out what makes people tick and to reconnect with them. So if you can get it to the right ears that can make something actually happen.
I think before all this, pandemic stuff happened, I think we've kind of had what they call a soundtrack to our lives. We
Ooh,
had
I
a
like
set we had a set list of songs that defined our life. But I think we're going to come out of this with a different set list. And
Ooh.
I think it's going to become a different soundtrack, because those of us who have evolved through this and kind of come out on the other side more enlightened because of the things that we've learned, I think that we're really going to have to take what's the word I'm looking for? Crap. I don't know.
Onomatopoeia, guacamole.
No. um, we're gonna have,
Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. No.
now you're showing your age. No, we're gonna have to take inventory of what makes us who we are on the other side of this, because I think what makes us who we are is different now than it would have been 4 or 5 months ago.
I agree with you. Well, listen, I know you're the podcast host here, but because I'm also a podcast host, I'm going to turn around and ask you the same question.
I was afraid of that. Well, my first one would be probably Paradise City by Guns N' Roses, because Guns N' Roses was actually the reason I started listening to music in 1993.
Okay.
Because I went to Great Escape with Double H Hole in the Woods. It was the first year that Double H was open.
Okay.
And obviously because Charlie Wood owned Great Escape and he started Double H, he let all of us go there for free every year.
Cool.
So my first year there, we went on the Magical Mystery Tour, and that was the first time I'd ever heard Paradise City by Guns N' Roses. So that got me listening to music. Beyond that, it would probably be. I get emotional talking about this one because
It's okay.
It's also a camp thing, but it's also somebody we just lost. "Lean on Me" by Bill Withers. I hate getting it. I hate getting emotional.
No, we want to see the real you.
"Lean on Me" is the camp theme song because I hate this.
I love this.
I don't. As somebody who is a special needs individual, because you'll never hear me refer to myself as disabled or handicapped, because I'm capable of doing things. I just do things differently. I was told growing up, people around me when I was growing up made determinations for themselves what they thought I was capable of instead of asking me what I was capable of. The first time I was on the property of Double H, they never asked me what I was capable of. They asked me what I was interested in doing. And that made all the difference in the world.
Sure.
So I hate this.
It's okay.
You put me on the spot
very cathartic.
like that.
Go with it. Embrace it. Embrace it, man.
It's
this is you.
Are you familiar with, I believe he's a country artist, Mark Wills? After the stream, listen to a song called "Don't Laugh at Me."
Okay.
And it's also a camp song.
Okay.
It kind of it describes different people, and it kind of puts forth, we're all similar, but we have our differences because we all can't be the same. And I think that really defines, who I am, because I want to be as similar to others in being able to do the same things as other people, but I also want to retain my individuality. And
completely understand.
And then I would say what defines me now, as far as musically, in my older years, started when I was 15. Anything by Linkin Park, because they got me through a time I'd rather not go back to.
Okay.
In high school, and since we lost the lead singer 3 years ago, I've basically done nothing but listen to them, and it's been interesting. So there are a lot of songs that I think people could listen to get to know who I am, but to really understand who I am, it's probably, like the range of emotions that I go through and the range of different character types that I go through would probably be anything by Linkin Park.
Are you ready to let people know you?
That's a good question. There are people that know certain aspects of me, because I don't think that you act the same way around everybody that you interact with.
True.
I think you are at least mildly a different person around each person, because you adapt to their personality. Like it, if you're connecting with somebody, you're connecting with their personality. Not everybody has the same personality. So you are connecting.
But wait, what if they're doing the same with you and they're adapting to your personality?
Well, then we really don't know who's adapting to who.
See, but I could argue, there's a couple things, if you don't mind me interrupting.
Sure.
I could argue that we're all chameleons. So I may act differently around you than I do around my friend Bob, for example, but it's still me. Maybe I'm adapting to their personality. And maybe the real issue there isn't I'm not being myself. It's that I'm trying to change myself for them rather than just being me exactly the same to everybody. But the other point I wanted to make is as you get older, thank goodness, you get to a point where you're like, I don't care, this is me, and they got to accept me as me. So, for example, in the interaction we just had where you were choking up and you
Yeah.
were saying you hate this, you're going to get a point where you're my age and you're going to choke up, and if I'm and not feel embarrassed about it at all, and you're not going to be sitting there thinking, "Oh God, I can't cry. I don't want to." You're
Yeah.
going to be like, "I'm going to cry. People got to deal with it." So you'll
My
get
my
there,
big
man.
my biggest thing was I just didn't want it on the internet.
Oh.
That I generally I don't mind being emotional around friends, but I didn't want it to be on the internet for God knows how long. Um,
Oops.
I'm reading the last comment that Unfunny Guy left. Do you realize that he have a phenomenal night?
Oh, see, I thought he just misspelled it, but yes. You guys have a phenomenal night. Smile and laugh often, my friend. Oh, that's great. See, that's funny. So he must be the
Oh
funniest
wow.
unfunny guy in the world. That is great.
Yeah.
I love it.
He's actually somebody I follow on Twitter and I believe here on YouTube.
Cool.
Yeah, he's somebody that I have gotten to know at least mildly. I don't know him a great deal, but I know him at least a little.
That's cool.
But this has been fun. We
Yeah, it's
definitely
been
need
a
to
ton
we
of fun.
definitely need to do this again and not get me emotional next time. That doesn't work for me.
I can't make any promises there, Crash.
um, but yeah, it's nice to be able to connect with people, and I think it's something that's necessary right now. So I think finding ways to connect with others also keeps us connected with ourselves because I think it kind of it allows us to keep a check on ourselves and keep an idea as to where we are mentally and emotionally. So I think that's one of the reasons that I really want this podcast endeavor to continue.
Absolutely.
Because I think it's a lot of self reflection and a lot of exploration of, you know, humans being multifaceted, multidimensional, and not just one sided.
Absolutely. Very well said. And hopefully the fine folks at Bang Energy Drink agree with that assessment and want to get
I think
behind
you're
this
just gonna
100%.
I
Huh?
think you're just gonna manifest that into happening.
That's how
And
things happen. That's how you manifest your destiny, baby. Bang.
well, hopefully it happens, and if it does, I will let you know. After we end this stream, I'll connect with you on Facebook and go over something we were talking about before stream.
Okay.
But yeah, I think this is a good place to end it, and I hope to maybe have a part two at some point
I would
when we
be happy
can
to.
work it out again.
Yes, this has been a true pleasure. I'm so glad we reconnected through Facebook and you invited me on. It's an honor, pleasure. It's always fun to talk to you, my friend, and I'm so glad
And
that I had an
I think we
opportunity to do
both have
so.
to thank Kevin Ankeny for giving me
Yes,
the idea.
Deuce. I
Um,
wanted to give him props earlier, but we went
yeah,
ahead and started talking, and it's like, oh,
yeah.
should I backtrack and mention Kevin?
No,
We shouldn't mention him because he didn't listen in tonight, but he may be listening to the recording
he'll
of the
listen to
show. Hi,
the
Kevin. He's been
yeah
posting COVID-19 diaries. Have you seen it?
yeah. Actually, when we did his episode, I called it Kevin Ankeny's COVID Diaries.
Yeah.
That's what I called the episode. I told him that he needs to actually publish those
Oh, they're
because
great. They
yeah,
are
they're
great.
hilarious. But yeah, I'm glad we got to do this. I'm looking forward to a part two, and I'm glad that we're back in contact because I think I think it's going to be fun. I think, we have a lot of the ability to have a lot of great ideas between the two of us.
Well, at least your side of it. I bring about that. You're the man.
Well, you bring the experience, because you've been around the longest.
Oh, had to sneak in one more age joke before we signed off. Huh? Good for you, man.
Well, you left it open. I had to.
I know. Oh, I would have taken it too. You got to take any chance you get.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I will see you soon.
Keep on rolling and ranting, baby.
All right. Bye-bye.
Peace.